It really happened. Hidden away in a military bunker outside of Moscow, shortly after midnight on September 26, 1983, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet Air Defense Forces was given an alert from the state-of-the-art early warning system codenamed OCO that 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles had been launched from the United States toward the Soviet Union. Tensions between the two Cold War adversaries were at an all-time high, following the Soviet Union's destruction of a South Korean passenger plane a few weeks earlier, along with an ominous buildup of forces that had the Kremlin convinced the United States was preparing a nuclear first strike. Therefore, when the alerts popped up on his computer screen, Lieutenant Colonel Petrov didn't take them lightly, and for several long, tense moments, the fate of the entire world rested on his actions. Thankfully for the entire world, Petrov suspected the signal was some kind of glitch, given the unlikelihood that the United States would start a nuclear war with just a handful of missiles, and so he waited for secondary verification of the incoming strike before notifying his superiors, verification that would never come. After the clock ticked past the missiles' projected arrivals, Petrov took his finger off the button to wipe the heavy beads of sweat from his brow. It was, in fact, a glitch in the OCO satellite system. Secrecy and embarrassment led to this incident being hidden from the public until long after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. But now we know that, in September of 1983, the world as we know it could have easily been destroyed were it not for the hesitation of a single human being. Ironically enough, just a couple of months earlier, Hollywood had warned us of this very thing.
David Lightman is your average, everyday, middle-class suburban teenager, playing video games, showing up late to class, trying to get the attention of girls, and accidentally hacking into top-secret government computer programs capable of starting World War III. Though David is sure the nuclear missiles he sent to the United States from the Soviet Union are just parts of a harmless simulation, the government arrests him, accuses him of treason, and refuses to listen to him when he explains what's really going on. As a rogue AI takes the simulation to its most logical extreme and puts the world on the brink of nuclear disaster, it is up to David to break out of government custody and find the designer of the simulation, the only man who knows how to stop the WarGames.
Before we go any further, if you could please hit that like button, we could avert global catastrophe. If you really do like this video, please subscribe as well. Thank you in advance. With that out of the way, let's get back to the subject at hand. In 1979, the writers Walter Parkes and Lawrence Lasker began working on a project called The Genius, which was to be a film about a dying scientist, loosely inspired by Stephen Hawking, who finds his successor in a highly intelligent but misunderstood kid. While doing research, the pair of writers learned about a growing subculture of young computer hackers, and they started talking to various experts at the Stanford Research Institute and the Rand Corporation. Thus, The Genius began its transformation into WarGames, which considered the possibility of a young hacker accidentally breaking into a top-secret government computer and nearly starting World War III. With the support of producer Leonard Goldberg, they shopped the script around to various studios that didn't find it believable. The only studio that showed any interest was MGM UA, who tentatively agreed to produce and distribute WarGames as long as the budget was kept to a relatively low $12 million. To direct it, they hired Martin Brest, whose only major credit at the time was the George Burns heist comedy Going in Style. Brest butted heads with Parkes and Lasker and had new scripts written without their input. These scripts took a more dark and serious tone, and after principal photography began and dailies were sent to the producers, things were looking pretty grim for the entire project. 12 days into filming, Goldberg then fired Brest, citing the dry and wooden tone he'd given the story, and hired John Badham to replace him. Badham was a workhorse television director whose feature film credits included Saturday Night Fever and 1979's Dracula. and after taking a quick look at the existing shooting script, he called up Parks and Lasker and asked for their earlier script, which he felt was far superior. The new director was given a couple of weeks to prepare, but on the urging of a waiting cast and crew, he began filming just 4 days later. The lead role of young David Lightman was given to Matthew Broderick, who at the time was a rising star in theater, poised to win a Tony in 1983 for his work on Neil Simon's Brighton Beach memoirs. Part of prepping for his role in WarGames, Broderick had an arcade cabinet of Galaga installed in his apartment so that he could learn to play proficiently for a handful of scenes. He was also supposed to learn typing, as unlike most hacker movies that would follow, WarGames features people actually typing the exact letters that appear on the screen. But by Broderick's own admission, he didn't put as much effort into that as he did Galaga. Opposite him as his teenage love interest Jennifer is Ali Sheedy, who, like Broderick, only had one feature film credit to her name, in her case it was 1983's Bad Boys, but would go on to become a staple actor of the 1980s, even earning a spot in the so-called Brat Pack for appearing in The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire.
I stole your wallet.
Until rewatching the movie for the purposes of this review, I don't think I ever fully appreciated the work that these two young actors do in WarGames. They come across as surprisingly authentic, with a lot of nuance and awkward teenage energy you don't usually get from younger actors. While I don't want to take anything away from them though, some credit should also go to the director, John Badham, who coached them heavily once he came aboard. Broderick and Sheedy both worried that they would be fired as soon as Badham came aboard, but despite having no say in their original casting, he knew they were right for the film, even if Martin Brest had initially directed them to play their parts with more dourness and stoicism. It was Badham who encouraged the actors to have fun, to act more innocent, and to feel free to improvise, and I dare say that without these instructions, their performances, and the film itself for that matter, would have no heart. The key role of Stephen Falcon, the reclusive genius inspired by Stephen Hawking, was initially written as a vehicle for John Lennon, who was interested in the part during the early days of the script's development. Of course, Lennon died in December of 1980, so the part was instead given to British character actor and multiple Tony Award-winning stage performer John Wood. Wood also provides the voice of Joshua.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
But he reads his lines backwards, the last word first, first word last, not actually speaking in reverse, to flatten his affect.
Sorry to hear that, Professor. Yesterday's game was interrupted.
The great Dabney Coleman plays the antagonistic Dr. McKittrick, and Barry Corbin plays General Behringer.
God damn it, I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought it'd do any good.
Other notable actors include Maury Chaykin and Eddie Deason as the geeks Jim and Malvin.
Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head! Back doors are not secrets!
Yeah, but Jim, you're giving away all our best tricks.
John Spencer as Captain Lawson, and Michael Madsen in his screen debut as Lieutenant Phelps. Including the work done under Martin Brest, some of which did make it into the final cut of the movie, filming took place between August and November of 1982, largely in and around Seattle, at Big Bear and Los Angeles in California, and of course at sound stages in Culver City. It was a fairly uneventful shoot, with one Jeep accident actually being written into the script after it happened. While the NORAD exterior was meticulously recreated to look as authentic as possible, the War Room set, where most of the film takes place, is wildly larger and more elaborate than the actual War Room, through which a handful of the production crew did manage to tour. All of the video screens, with primitive computer effects put together under the supervision of Michael Fink, had to be perfectly synced at the start of each shot, not only to ensure continuity but also to match frame rates to prevent flickering. The larger screens were all done with film projectors, both front and rear facing, while the 84 smaller screens were all videotape, controlled by a single Apple II computer. The filmmakers did strive for accuracy, but they made a few pretty big errors, such as getting DEF CON completely backwards, and conflating NORAD, the SAC, and the Navy. Still, the military advisors, including NORAD's real general at the time, General Hardinger, fully supported the underlying premise of the military side of the film, the notion that humans should never be taken out of the loop, no matter the crisis. The Air Force, however, opposed the movie on the grounds that it would create panic over what was seen as an impossible scenario involving accidental nuclear war. Now, of course, as we've already learned, those fears were a lot less fictional than we wanted to believe, and indeed, after the film's release, President Reagan, a fan of the movie and family friend to writer Lawrence Lasker, signed the nation's first cybersecurity directive based on research his administration did on the plausibility of the WarGames scenario. The writers also approached the hacking side of the story with realism at the forefront, with one of their big cheats, the program David uses to call every phone number in a given area code, later becoming reality, earning the name War Dialer in reference to the film. This scene with the payphone caused headaches for the phone industry too, because it demonstrates a trick that really did work, and in the years that followed, companies started melting plastic seals between the phone parts to prevent them from being taken apart. While we're stopped, let me just take a minute to thank my patrons. Their support really makes this channel possible, so please, if you like these videos, consider joining my Patreon to get access to bonus content, vote on future topics, and more. You can also give me a one-time contribution by clicking on the thanks button below. Also, if you want even more content from me, I'm the co-host of a couple of different podcasts, The Streaming Heap and From Here to Paternity, which are available wherever you get your podcasts, and I have a novel called Paradox that is available through Amazon. If all else fails, though, you can always check out my website at emcgill.com, where you'll find written reviews of plenty more sci-fi classics in both film and literature. Now then, with all that shameless self-promotion out of the way, let's move on. WarGames released in June of 1983, to good reviews and great financial success, earning $79.6 million at the North American box office and becoming one of the most profitable films of the year. The movie was not without controversy, with the subsequent rise of the hacking subculture at least partially blamed on WarGames. This in turn led Congress to pass the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. Looking back almost 40 years later, though, it's hard to conclude that WarGames is to blame for any of this, as it merely predicted the seemingly inevitable. Not that any of the controversy hurt the movie, quite the opposite, really. It was a huge cultural hit that still resonates and is still referenced today, and it skyrocketed its young leads, Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, into superstardom. Though its only direct sequel is a direct-to-video forgotten relic of the mid-2000s, the film has inspired countless other filmmakers and writers over the years. Personally, this was one of those VHS tapes I nearly wore out from watching it so many times as a kid, and it really cemented a lot of my general worldview about computers, the military, and geek culture in ways that, as an adult, I still think are both valid and positive. It also showed me the most ingenious way to butter an ear of corn. As an awkward child who liked video games and who had a friend down the street who claimed to have hacked into a Russian satellite that later malfunctioned and crashed into the ocean, this movie really spoke to me on an emotional level, seemed to understand me better than I understood myself. That's because, at its heart, beneath all the early 80s hacker lingo, Hollywood-style military melodrama, and plausible sci-fi speculations, WarGames is, first and foremost, a character piece. It's about a disaffected kid with a lot of smarts but not a lot of good grades, with weird parents and even weirder friends, and with almost no experience in talking to girls. He doesn't know where he could possibly fit into the world until he meets the deeply broken and disillusioned Falcon, who is a near-perfect image of what David could become. It is David, with the not insubstantial help of Jennifer, who pulls Falcon away from fatalism and regret, and it is Falcon who teaches David that he could not only have a place in the world, but could be critical to its future. From a historical perspective, this all reflects the Cold War mentality and the very real fear society had of nuclear Armageddon, but it only works because it shows the importance of the human element, shows how it is our humanity, not our technology, that will ultimately save us. Thankfully, the Cold War is over now, and there's no chance anybody will set off World War III with the reckless threat of nuclear weapons anymore. Yeah. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. If you're watching this in the future from a post-apocalyptic nuclear hellscape, let us know in the comments if you know where we can find clean food and water. Thank you for watching, and until next time, when we'll catch back up with fiction's most famous submariner, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Barbecue tonight. You want to invite your little friend?
Please.
David.